Of all the barriers that may prevent someone from coming to faith, the issues of evil and suffering in our world are often regarded as being the biggest. However, given that there are so many Christians in the world, is it possible to have faith in spite of the reality of evil and suffering? And if it is possible, I wonder, can we maybe better understand the reality of evil and suffering on the earth today? In this episode of The Journey, we will look at a couple of different elements. We will look at what for Christians is the true nature and source and reality of evil and suffering. But we'll also look at whether it's possible to be a Christian, whether it's possible to have genuine faith in spite of the presence of evil and suffering. For humans, there are really two paths open to us in life. There's a path of good and a path of evil. There's a path of right and a path of wrong. Going right back to the start of time as Christians understand it, in the Garden of Eden, evil and suffering came in as a reality as a result of a choice made by the free will of Adam, the first man. Adam in so many ways is representative of all people. God gave him free will. He said, you can either go my way or you can go a different way. It's up to you. We all have choices to make in life, and I'm sure if we're being really honest with ourselves, we have probably, even in some small way, caused other people to suffer as the result of what we could describe as evil behaviour. Consequently, the vast majority of evil and suffering in the world tends to come as a result of the decisions and behaviour of humans. For Christians, it's when people act contrary to the good ways that God first asked and intended for us to take. Whether it's an evil dictator, whether it's a wicked parent, or so many other things, there is the potential within humans to cause evil and suffering. Many cultures in the world today, and definitely lots of cultures of years ago, however, didn't have the same view of suffering that we tend to possess. Rather than potentially seeing suffering as evidence that a good God can't exist, or at least if he does exist, seeing it as a barrier to knowing him or trusting him, they would in fact see suffering and the presence of evil in their lives as something to be resisted, as something potentially, when they come into contact with it, to refine who they were. In our culture today, though, we tend to have a very different view. Generally, we see suffering as something to be resisted and prevented. Think about it. The moment that you begin to suffer a headache, you want to do something to get rid of it. You don't want to see it as something to refine who you are. You immediately, if you're like me at least, reach for the medicine cabinet and want to grab a painkiller so you can get rid of the headache. Most human cultures before us, though, have known far greater physical pain than we tend to know. Many of those people didn't have access to proper painkillers. They didn't have access to anaesthetic. Yet we have more things in our world, more safeguards in our world to present suffering and even to resist suffering being something that we experience or something that we inflict on others, and yet we still see it potentially as a barrier to faith. If you think about evil is very often trivialized until it comes and visits our door. If you think about crime, for example, people so often love to watch documentaries or dramas about crime. But when crime suddenly comes and visits our door, if we were burgled in the night or something like that, we would have a fear of crime. We can have a fascination with it, but a fear as well. It can be like that with evil. We can sometimes be fascinated by evil and even dabble in it, but when it has negative connotations for us, we can tend to view it very differently. Could it be that we need to better understand why we feel like we do about evil and suffering? For Christians and for those who are considering Christian faith, they can in fact take comfort in the fact that evil and suffering do not come from God. They were not inflicted by him. God cannot give what he does not have, and he does not have in his heart evil or suffering. They can also take heart in the fact that God promises through the Bible one day that he is going to put a stop to evil and suffering. What's more, he gives us the grace to be able to bear up to these things and often to stand up to their presence in our lives while we continue to experience their negative effects. For Christians, the cards of evil and suffering have been marked. Their end is nigh. The end is coming for evil and suffering, because one day Jesus will wipe every tear dry and he will make the earth and heaven new, where there is no evil and where there is no suffering. The certain, sure hope for Christians is that one day Jesus is going to return, and when he does, he will make things new. He will make things as he'd originally intended them, and that will mean an end to evil and suffering. Until then, Jesus is with you when you suffer. He himself suffered. And so often when we pray, God does intervene, whether it's giving us the strength to resist evil or to bear up in the face of suffering, whereas sometimes he delivers from it completely by bringing an end to the evil and suffering. This is why Christians can have faith even though evil and suffering are part of our present reality on earth here today.
If you've enjoyed today's video, I want to encourage you to get connected to us here at Life Church. We've created what we're calling The Journey, and The Journey is a great place for you to go and be equipped, encouraged, and resourced as you go out on your own personal journey of discovering who God created you to be. Inside of The Journey, you'll find all sorts of resources that are just right for you, no matter what stage of your journey with God you may be on. We'd encourage you to get connected to us via the link below and take this opportunity to grow in your journey with God.